once he occupied the Oval Office. Now, we're not going to mention them all, but we will put the list on the side of the screen. Promises like creating jobs, lowering taxes, reforming the tax code, repealing, replacing Obamacare, cutting government regulations, renegotiating trade deals, rebuilding the military, and he also promised extreme vetting of people coming from countries that have ties to terror. He also promised to defeat ISIS and to nominate an originalist to the Supreme Court from a list of 20 that he put out. And this is what the 45th president said about keeping his promises earlier tonight.
I will not allow the mistakes of recent decades past to define the course of our future. For too long, we've watched our middle class shrink as we've exported our jobs and wealth to foreign countries. We've financed and built one global project after another, but ignored the fates of our children in the inner cities of Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, and so many other places throughout our land. We've defended the borders of other nations while leaving our own borders wide open for anyone to cross and for drugs to pour in at a now unprecedented rate. And we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas while our infrastructure at home has so badly crumbled. Then in 2016, the earth shifted beneath our feet. The rebellion started as a quiet protest, spoken by families of all colors and creeds, families who just wanted a fair shot for their children and a fair hearing for their concerns. But then the quiet voices became a loud chorus as thousands of citizens now spoke out together from cities small and large all across our country. Finally, the chorus became an earthquake, and the people turned out by the tens of millions, and they were all united by one very simple but crucial demand, that America must put its own citizens first, because only then can we truly make America great again.
Now, President Trump is off to a very good start because he's going down the list on his agenda, checking off major promises one by one. He does, however, face major obstacles and challenges that we need to be aware of. These are all coming his way. Now, you got an administration, I say it's coming from four fronts. You got the liberal crybaby snowflakes. They're the ones that have been out whining nonstop since the night of the election. And you've got the paid protesters who are now influencing the Democratic Party to go so hard anti-Trump that they want to obstruct his agenda at every turn. Even creating jobs didn't get the Democrats on their feet tonight. Then you have the alt-left propaganda media that we've been reporting on. Their bias is so blatant, it's only going to get worse as the president tries to move forward with his plans. And then lastly, this is the one I personally fear the most, and that's the Republican Party establishment, because they have the ability to undermine everything that President Trump said tonight that he wants to accomplish. So let me ask Republicans who aren't fully on board with the administration and the agenda a few simple questions. What part of vetting refugees that come into our country is not conservative? What part of building a wall and protecting our laws, our sovereignty, is not conservative? What part of a tax program that modifies the tax code, incentivizes businesses, we go from 7 brackets to 3, 15% corporate tax, what part of this is not Reagan-esque? What part of that is not conservative? What part of repealing, replacing Obamacare, top-down health care with free market solutions is not conservative? What part of sending education back to the states is not conservative so local communities can run education? What part of cutting burdensome regulation is not conservative? Don't we want limited government? What part of energy independence is not conservative? What part of rebuilding our military is not conservative? What part of nominating an originalist to the Supreme Court as a justice is not conservative? So my fear is that Republicans now, it's time for them to step up. And Democrats, by the way, they won't stop their petty nonsense. Don't expect any help from them. The president right now is willing to act and stop the precipitous decline of this country and help the American people with safety, security, getting jobs, and a better future for their families. And as for you whiny, crybaby Democrats that sat on your hands all night tonight and didn't even clap when the president talked about creating more jobs for 95 million Americans out of work? Well, that's how partisan, petty, and pathetic you really are. And by the way, once again, it confirms there's nothing Donald Trump can do. They will never support him. They'll never be his friends. So you Republicans, you need to take note. You're on your own. The Democrats will be offering zero help, even though, by the way, it's their failed radical liberal policies that President Trump and Republicans are now forced to clean up. Joining us now with reaction, author of the New York Times bestseller Treason, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. By the way, he has a FoxNews.com opinion piece coming out tomorrow on the president's address. How are you?
Good.
You've been here once. You sat back there once or twice.
Once or twice.
What'd you think?
Best speech of his career. I've blown away. I mean, better than the inaugural, better than his Gettysburg speech. He was in command. You were watching the President of the United States in a way that I thought was very profound. He actually did get, Cliff and I were sitting on the speaker's aisle on the Democratic side so we could watch them. And he actually began to build momentum all evening of more and more Democrats getting up, more and more applauding. He had a brilliant opening, condemning anti-Semitism and condemning the killing of the 2 Indian Americans in Kansas. And laying out a case for people to look at, talking about Black History Month. And I think probably the Democrats were startled. I mean, this was not what they expect from a Republican president. But he went on to, I think, in many ways unify us and to lay down some tough lines. I mean, you're exactly right on 2 fronts. One, there are left-wing Democrats who are never going to be for us. And not the answer there in the free societies, you go beat them, and that's okay. There are some Republicans who don't get what the president's trying to accomplish, and they're sort of a nuisance. But I must say, and I had a very good chat with Speaker Ryan before the speech, I think there's a very big desire to get very large things done, bigger than we did in 95, 96.
That's saying a lot.
It is saying a lot. No, I say this quite deliberately. You start putting in massive tax reform. You start putting in serious immigration reform. You start putting in very real effort at really profoundly shifting the health system. I had a very good talk today with Dr. Tom Price, who you couldn't get a better Health and Human Services Secretary. So I come out of tonight, I mean, I'm a Trump fan, and I really wanted him to win. And there was a brief moment early on when I stopped, Cliff and I were chatting, I thought, what if we were walking in to listen to President Hillary Clinton? And it did sort of give.
By the way, I wouldn't have been there, but okay. That's
but it gave me a sense of how big the gap is.
You wouldn't have been there, and I wouldn't have been there. You would have been home watching on your couch drinking beer.
But it did make me feel a lot better about the speech I saw.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, let's talk. I'm trying to say that the Republicans bear the burden here. Because it was obvious tonight, there's nothing that Donald Trump can do or say that they're going to support. I would say the vast, overwhelming majority. You may get Joe Manchin in the Senate. You may get a couple of, when he talked about the steel made in America, I saw some Rust Belt.
There were glimmers.
There were a few glimmers. So on a couple of issues, they're not going to help on the overall agenda.
Well, I think it depends on how it develops. He's going to split the Democrats in infrastructure. I mean, he may get half the Democrats for an infrastructure bill. Because, and if you watch, that was the first thing they really all stood up for. Because
government spending.
That's a government spending. And also, a lot of them represent urban areas that are in terrible shape. I mean, where the highways don't work, the metro system doesn't work, the waters, I mean, think about Flint, Michigan. And somebody comes along and says, hi, I got a program so you can have safe water in Flint, Michigan. You're the congressman from Flint. Do you want to work with them or not?
We're going to work with them.
Infrastructure will break them, I think, substantially.
Were you happy about, because I'm always worried about the $1 trillion price tag, because that sounds like why are you not worried? And he mentioned tonight, this is what I was interested in, he talked about government and business partnerships to get the money.
First of all, notice the way he said it.
Yeah.
$1 trillion worth of infrastructure.
That's a good point.
Because if you apply the woman skating rink model, and you've heard me talk about this, where Trump came in radically under the price of New York City. I think it's like 1/6 or 1/8 the price. You apply, and then he said this tonight when he talked about he's already starting to cut the price on the F-35. So I fully expect him to come in, whether it's going in space to Mars and Moon, whether it is building the F-35, whether it's building infrastructure. I'm building the wall. I certainly hope at every front we're going to get a Trump frugality And you
like the woman rink.
Like the woman
under
rink.
budget, you know.
Ahead of schedule.
Ahead of
using
schedule.
common sense.
Yeah.
I liked that very much. I liked his reference to fighting this terrible drug epidemic and the whole effort to deal with the opioid epidemic, which is terrible, both in terms of cutting it off at the border, but in terms of helping human beings who may currently be addicted. So I thought it was a very compelling speech across the board. And I was watching some old friends. I've known General John Kelly for many, many years. I've known General Mattis. And these are professionals. These aren't Republicans. They're not right-wingers. But I was watching their reaction. I think they're very pleased to have this commander-in-chief. You could see it during the evening as the speech went on. You know, they were paying attention. They really felt like they were part of a team.
The fact that, A, he keeps reiterating his commitment to the promises he made, which I also believe will help the country, is reassuring.
Sure.
But I also think that the narrative that the left has been trying to advance, oh, that he's crazy, oh, that he's unhinged, he was as presidential, including the inauguration, as anybody would. Look, you've seen Carter, you've seen Reagan, you've seen
Sure.
Bush 41, Bush 43, Clinton. Is there anybody you haven't seen?
I've been around for
You've
a
been
while.
around for a while. How does he stack up?
Well, I think, actually, I think that he certainly would rival Reagan in a different style. And this is part of what people got to understand about Trump versus normal politicians. Trump's not a great orator. Trump doesn't rely. I mean, Reagan clearly is a better speech deliverer. But this was a speech that had hammer blow after hammer blow after hammer blow. He talks about, I want to help the inner city. I mean, how can you not respond to 4,000 people being shot in Chicago and be glad you got a president who's
There's a
finally going to talk about it?
practicality to him, though.
Yeah, everything with him is, what do we need to get done? How can we fix it? What's going to work? It's total common sense. This is the first pure entrepreneur we've ever had as a president. And as you know, I'm writing a book on understanding Trump that'll come out this summer. And it's partly based on the idea that he is so different than anything we've ever seen, including me, by the way. I mean, I find myself every day studying Donald Trump and trying to figure out what is he doing, because he's so much more complicated than I would ever have thought possible.
In a good way.
In a good way, in the sense of a really smart senior guy who has solved problems his whole life, who has been practical his whole life, who's proven to us with his cabinet he can recruit a good team.
Isn't it? The amazing thing is, if you apply, remember the Grace Commission back in the Reagan
Sure.
years? Let me backtrack. Grace Commission, the biggest, best, smartest business minds in the country, they came up with recommendations how to run government more like a business. And how many were adopted? 0.
Right.
Okay, so now you have somebody that's actually implementing them without
Right.
even a commission.
I mean, now you actually have, but now you have a business leader who, first of all, is not afraid to make mistakes. And this is part of what the news media doesn't get. Of course Trump's going to make mistakes. He's doing more original, unique things than any president in modern times. Well, nobody can do all that and not make mistakes. But he knows, as an entrepreneur, you make a mistake, you back up, you correct it, you learn from it, you move forward. Mm-hmm. Other guys would sit around and plan for 7 years before they tried anything.
Right.
He'd have done 600 things by the time their plan was finished.
Yeah. Now, if you were Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, or if you were advising Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, they're very smart people, and they're very good friends of mine. McConnell knows more about running the Senate.
I'm more skeptical of...
McConnell knows more about running the Senate than I will know in my lifetime.
He did a great job
Paul
holding off that seat.
This will drive you nuts.
Oh, great.
Paul and I were talking tonight.
Yeah.
We may be the two most wonkish speakers in the history of the United States. We both love ideas. We both love public policy. I'm going to try to be helpful to him on tax policy and health policy and balancing the budget. And I'm an optimist that it's going to be painful and difficult and confusing, and people are going to yell at each other. They did that when I was Speaker.
But slowly over time, they chipped away your credibility. They just,
Sure.
and wore you down, tried to wear you down.
I didn't have Donald Trump with me.
That's a good point. All right, stay right there. Newt Gingrich is going to stay with us. We'll have more with him in just a few minutes. But first, tonight, in his first address to a joint session of Congress, President Trump talked about the need to fix America's crumbling infrastructure. Let's watch this.
To launch our national rebuilding, I will be asking Congress to approve legislation that produces a $1 trillion investment in infrastructure of the United States, financed through both public and private capital, creating millions of new jobs. This effort will be guided by two core principles: buy American and hire American.
And here now with reaction is the Transportation Secretary, Elaine Chao. Madam Secretary, good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Can you explain the public-private capital and how that's going to work?
You know, the needs of our nation to improve our infrastructure is so great that the federal government cannot assume the cost for all of it. So it behooves us as a nation to address the deteriorating infrastructure by thinking about new and innovative ways in which we can fund our infrastructure. And so President Trump has so many really exciting and novel ideas about how to finance our deteriorating infrastructure so that once again we will become more competitive in the worldwide environment and so that America can be great once again. So public-private partnerships are a very important part of financing, of a new way of financing our roads and bridges that are in disrepair and are very dangerous. Sure.
Explain how that works, though.
Yeah, I will. So basically, we allow different kinds of money, private sector money, to come into the United States. I'm not saying foreign, to come and fund, let's say, a bridge or a road, or it can be any kind of infrastructure. By the way, I should also add that the president's initiative on infrastructure will include probably energy, water, broadband. So it's not just roads and bridges, but it's to build the whole infrastructure that will make our country more competitive going forward. So public-private partnership allows private sector money to come into the economy and fund public works. So far, right now, there are so many impediments to allowing private sector monies to come in. And we should do away with all those impediments. Yes.
Well, so maybe, if I'm hearing you properly, maybe what you're saying is that, for example, if a company were to rebuild a road, they might get their investment back by, say, having a toll on that road, and this way the taxpayers don't pay a penny, they make a profit, it's a win-win, something like that?
Yes, thank you for putting it that way. You know, that is certainly one example of how that would work. Now, I have to say there are some people who may not support toll roads, but we have to take a look at all of these financing mechanisms because, once again, the needs of our infrastructure are so great that the federal government cannot and should not be the only source of funding to repair our bridges, our roads, you know, our energy grid, and to install new aspects of the infrastructure for a new America of the future.
Madam Secretary, I think that's what Speaker Gingrich was talking about. Donald Trump thinks way out of the box, and the country needs that type of innovative thinking. Thank you for being with us. All right, coming up earlier tonight, in his first address to a joint session of Congress, President Trump promised to defeat ISIS. Deputy Assistant to the President, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, along with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, will join us. All of that and House Freedom Caucus members and Louis Gohmert are standing by.
The time for small thinking is over. The time for trivial fights is behind us. We just need the courage to share the dreams that fill our hearts, the bravery to express the hopes that stir our souls, and the confidence to turn those hopes and those dreams into action. I believe that real and positive immigration reform is possible as long as we focus on the following goals: to improve jobs and wages for Americans, to strengthen our nation's security, and to restore respect for our laws. If we are guided by the well-being of American citizens, then I believe Republicans and Democrats can work together to achieve an outcome that has eluded our country for decades.
And welcome back to Hannity, as we are broadcasting tonight from our nation's capital, where President Donald Trump earlier this evening addressed a joint session of Congress, and we continue again with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. I have a very hard time filtering, getting to, how do they get to the conclusion that somehow if somebody wants to be a guest in our country and they come from a country tied to terror, that it's a horrible thing to vet them, or that it's a horrible thing to protect our borders and know who's coming into our country? Why is that?
Well, look, I mean, I can just tell from those statements you're a right-winger.
And a racist and a xenophobe and a homophobe.
If you're on the left, you say first, remember the guy who stood up at the Oscars? You're an American, if you're a left-winger, you say, first of all, why do we have borders? Why do you distrust people? You go down this list, and I was watching it. The person I cued off of most was Elizabeth Warren, because I could see her very
I watched her, too.
And every once in a while, towards the end, she actually broke down and stood and applauded.
Yeah.
I mean, she couldn't help herself. But it was kind of fun to watch, because even when Trump said stuff that you knew was an applause line that they really, I mean, she would manage to discipline herself to not
to do.
She wasn't for American jobs.
How does that go over with the American people that they're...
Well, they look nuts. Look, I've said to you before that with Thatcher, Thatcher is much more like Trump than Reagan, because the left responded in Britain to Thatcher so intensely that they went further and further and further to the left. And finally, by 1987, in her second re-election, the press referred to him as the loony left. Mm-hmm. And if you watch what's happening, it's going to be very interesting. All of those left-wing activists watched the Democrats tonight. Nobody jumped up and booed. Nobody walked out. Many of them actually, a couple of times, all of them got up and applauded.
Yeah, but
now, they're going to have to go back home and have all these nutcake left-wing activists say, why did you sell us out?
Even the Rasmussen poll, a plurality of Democrats want them to work with Trump.
Right.
But they maybe got on their feet 3 or 4 times.
Well, look, but this is the crisis they've got. The
hard left.
The hard left will kill them. The ones who want them to work with Trump are going to go fishing or to a football game. Mm-hmm. And so you go back home. I mean, the people who are showing up at these various town hall meetings are the hard left. And the hard left, it's why Schumer, who is a natural deal maker, I mean, Schumer and Trump ought to be able to sit down as fellow New Yorkers and get a lot done. But Schumer knows his left wing will kill him.
So he won't do it.
And that's part of it.
Let me ask you.
Let me just say one other thing about this, because it was so amazing. If you go through and outline this, it would be a great thing to do if a professor was willing to actually be semi-pro-Trump. If you went through and outlined this speech, the number of specific policies that he got through in about an hour to taking out the applause time is astonishing.
It was all the promises he made, which I go back to. Here, I guess, is there. You said you spoke to Paul Ryan. I had an interview with Paul Ryan recently.
Right.
He promised, he supports the Trump agenda, and he said they're going to get all of this done legislatively. He believes in 200 days, and he's built in even a cushion in case something doesn't work out well. And then he talked about the health care bill being repealed and replaced. And then I talked to some of the guys in the Freedom Caucus who are going to join us in a minute, and they're saying to me, well, we haven't seen the bill, we haven't read the bill, and they're worried.
Which is why it's going to take 200 days. I mean,
we're not going to get a health care bill for 200 days for an economic?
No, here's my point. The most Ryan can do, and he's extraordinarily bright, is he can put together the benchmark bill everybody fights over. But he can't ram anything through. He doesn't have the muscle to ram anything through. Furthermore, it would be bad government to ram it through, and he couldn't get it through the Senate.
But there's also some complicated issues as it relates to reconciliation. It's got to be revenue neutral. I got that.
Not just that. Let me give you the example of revenue neutral. For Republicans to allow the Congressional Budget Office to score anything is insane. The Congressional Budget Office was off by trillions of dollars. It is a left-wing, totally dishonest institution, and they ought to get rid of it and go to a different scoring system.
Yeah, well, I agree, and I think that's smart, too. What would be if you were Speaker, you have the Freedom Caucus, the more conservative side, then you have some Republicans, maybe 20 or so, that are in district where Hillary Clinton carried the district. Yeah. So how do you bring that and create a coalition that's going to advance the agenda, get everything that we heard tonight actually done? Because we need the jobs, we need safety, security, we need health care reform,
You do two things.
What do you do?
First, you listen, and you listen, and you listen until you can't stand it. And in that process, everybody gets out in the open what they need. Second, you say to each group, you tell me what you need in order to vote yes. Now you tell me what you need in order to vote yes. You tell me what you can't live with. You tell me what you can't live with. And you gradually build a box.
And you think that's going to happen?
Well, we balanced the budget 4 straight years. So, yeah, I think it's
Great
doable.
job. You're going to balance the budget again? You're going to show them how to do it?
Going to work with them.
Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. It's great to be in your hometown. Also, tonight, President Trump used the term we have never heard the Obama White House use: radical Islamic terrorism. Watch this.
Our obligation is to serve, protect, and defend the citizens of the United States. We are also taking strong measures to protect our nation from radical Islamic terrorism. We have seen the attacks in France, in Belgium, in Germany, and all over the world. It is not compassionate, but reckless to allow uncontrolled entry from places where proper vetting cannot occur. Those given the high honor of admission to the United States should support this country and love its people and its values. We cannot allow a beachhead of terrorism to form inside America. We cannot allow our nation to become a sanctuary for extremists.
Joining us now with reaction is the Deputy Assistant to the President, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Obviously, protecting the homeland, that is tied to extreme vetting, that is tied to building the wall and border security. And the President laid down a marker in the campaign. And again tonight, this job is getting done. How quickly?
You heard tonight, he said we're going to build a great wall. Tomorrow morning you can expect some news about the immigration executive order.
So they've redone the order.
Yep, we've addressed all the politically motivated issues that the court said were potentially problematic from their perspective. And I think the most important thing tonight, did you hear the phrase that he said most clearly and most loudly? There was a lot of buzz in the left-wing media in the last 24 hours that, oh, there's turmoil in the White House and arguments over vocabulary.
By the way, it's just not true.
No,
I know for a fact.
It's not
I've
true.
seen you there.
It's not true.
Yeah.
And what happened tonight? They expected us to dilute the verbiage. He
Not a
said,
bit.
radical Islamic terrorism. Politico, did you hear it? New York Times, did you hear it? Washington Post, CNN, did you hear it? The president is not backing down.
You wrote a book and you believe we can defeat them.
Yes.
It's got to be a monumental task to achieve. Systematically, if you lay out the strategy and tactics to achieve that goal, how do you do it?
You do it very simply. You use the best military the world has ever seen, ours, to help local actors defeat ISIS. ISIS is the 5-meter target. Right now, we have to crush and kill that organization because they've done something no other jihadi group has managed to do in 90 years. Since the dissolution of the original caliphate, these are the first people to create a new one. Not Al-Qaeda, not the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS. We have to take that down with our Muslim allies, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, help them fight this
Do you
war
think
for
the
themselves.
Jordanians, Egyptians, the Saudis, Israel, the UK, the US can unite? And I know Americans, and the president addressed this, we spent $6 trillion on wars in the Middle East. He does not have the stomach for it, nor do I think the American people. So what is our contribution? Is it intelligence? It's certainly not going to be boots on the ground, I don't believe.
It's leadership. The biggest contribution is leadership. You heard right at the beginning of the speech, America is back and America is going to lead. So number one, it's not fake smoke and mirrors coalition. You know, the vaunted Obama 68-nation coalition didn't exist. I was there. I went into theater. I went to CENTCOM. There were 2 Muslim nations in the briefing room out of the 60.
What do you know about this developing coalition? I asked the Prime Minister of Israel in a recent interview about the developing relationship with the Saudis, the Egyptians, Jordanians. My interpretation is it's deeper than anybody really knows, and certainly they would be an alliance against Iranian hegemony in the region.
Look, if anybody knows how serious the threat is...
Oh, it's Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And by the way, and Donald Trump. I would argue this, excuse me. Yeah. I'm not trying to interrupt you. Benjamin Netanyahu has been alone in understanding evil in our time. People forget Stalin, communism, fascism, Nazism, Imperial Japan, the killing fields. 100 million human souls died. So evil exists in the name of communism, Nazism, fascism. Right? All right, so evil does exist.
Yep.
Its current form is called radical Islamic terrorism, and there's a whole group of people in this country that won't even admit it.
This is perhaps the most important thing. We're not going to talk about jobs for jihadis. We're not going to talk about root causes.
Man-caused disasters,
no, it's
overseas contingencies.
We have to understand, this is evil incarnate. Whether you're a Nazi running a death camp or whether you're a jihadi in ISIS.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Agreed.
Same thing. And we are going to put that back into the discussion. Remember the word he used several times that we have not heard for 8 years. He used the word enemy. We haven't used that.
Also said one other thing, and I appreciated this. If we're going to fight, win.
Yes.
You've got to win.
Sean, let's take politics out of it, the administration. I met Mr. Trump for the first time in the summer of 2015. The first conversation I had, within 3 minutes, I knew two things about this man. A, he knows we are at war. B, he wants to win that war. What you saw tonight is the dedication to make that a reality now that he's the commander-in-chief.
Well said. Dr. Gorka, good to see you, my friend.
Thanks, Sean.
Appreciate it. And coming up tonight, in his address, President Trump called on Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare. Republicans have been promising Americans they do this for years. On Hannity, we are holding them accountable. We'll check in with Congressman Dave Bratt, Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, Louis Gohmert. All join me next right here on set. That and more as we continue from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C.
A new national pride is sweeping across our nation, and a new surge of optimism is placing impossible dreams firmly within our grasp. What we are witnessing today is the renewal of the American spirit. Our allies will find that America is once again ready to lead. So calling on this Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare with reforms that expand choice, increase access, lower costs, and at the same time provide better health care. Mandating every American to buy government-approved health insurance was never the right solution for our country. The way to make health insurance available to everyone is to lower the cost of health insurance, and that is what we are going to do. Obamacare is collapsing, and we must act decisively to protect all Americans. Action is not a choice, it is a necessity. So I am calling on all Democrats and Republicans in Congress to work with us to save Americans from this imploding Obamacare disaster.
All right, that was President Trump earlier tonight saying that Obamacare must be repealed and replaced. Now, for years, Republicans have been promising you, the American people, they would do just that if given the opportunity. Well, now they have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. No excuses. Now, on this show, we have been holding Washington accountable as a new segment, and we're doing just that. Joining us now with reaction are four GOP lawmakers: Virginia Congressman Dave Bratt, North Carolina Congressman Mark Meadows, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, and Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert. The prior three are members of the Freedom Caucus. You have an announcement.
All right.
They just invited you into their caucus.
We have talked, and I've
negotiated a deal.
Joining the Freedom Caucus.
All right, so Louis, you're in.
Yeah, you brokered the deal.
I brokered the deal, and you got, that means you got a car coming, American made, of course.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right.
You're invited in too, you know.
Well, I appreciate it. I do. Listen, I had an interview, as you all know, with the Speaker, and I since even had a conversation with the Speaker. He committed to me on this show that he supports the entire Trump agenda that the president spoke about tonight, and that he can get this done legislatively with a cushion built in 200 days. Okay. You guys are worried you haven't seen the repeal and replace bill. All four of you have told me that. What are you worried about, and what did you think of Speaker Gingrich saying that he's going to put all these things in a box and it's going to be adjusted after it gets scored?
Well,
This member goes first.
I got to see the bill before I can agree to anything. I'm kind
Understood.
of anal like that. I'd like to read the bill. You remember 2010? We all said, if you elect us, you give us the majority, we will read the bills. So, back actually in 2014, Boehner had a bill that was going to be really a border enforcement bill. And when we finally got the bill 2 days before we were going to vote on it, it was a de facto amnesty bill, but you had to read very carefully. So it's important to read the bill.
Congressman Jordan?
Yeah, what we've heard about the leaked bill that's coming from leadership is it says we're going to repeal Obamacare, except we're going to keep the Medicaid expansion. It said we're going to repeal Obamacare, except we're going to keep tax increases. And it said we're going to repeal Obamacare, except we're going to start this new entitlement called refundable tax credits. So that's not repealed. So what we've said is be real basic, real simple. Put on President Trump's desk the exact same language we put on President Obama's desk. We all
repeal. You want a repeal bill.
Repeal,
but
then a separate bill replaced.
At the same time?
Same time, but two different pieces of legislation.
So, because there's a danger, because within Obamacare, Congressman Meadows, there is the discretion of the Health and Human Services Secretary that would, if it's not repealed, if there's another Obama like the president, he would have that discretion to put it back in play.
Well, and I think that's why we have to have a full repeal, Sean. Really, when we're looking at this, Secretary Price, I trust him to do the right thing. He's a good man and was a colleague. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we actually repeal it. We don't partially repeal it and partially replace it. And that's why it's critical that we get it right. I think we are all in agreement, whether it's moderates or conservatives, that we've got to repeal this thing and we've got to replace it for
In fairness, I asked Congressman Brett, I asked the Speaker if he's having regular conversations. Apparently, I guess you guys, as a caucus, you meet once or twice a week. He said yes, he wants you. He mentioned you guys specifically and Louis. That he wants to meet. Why are you laughing? John Boehner wouldn't even talk to you.
Oh, yeah, he had something to say about me.
By the way, Louis Gohmert was so kind. He gave me the seat in the gallery tonight to watch.
You were so gracious. I mean, I looked up there, and people were coming from all over the gallery to shake Sean Hannity's hand. It was really nice.
You invited me in 2014 to see Obama. It was a much better night.
Which was better? You thought
it was a much better night. But as I said earlier, he says he wants to reach out to you. But all of you individually seem skeptical. Why?
Well, because we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. So Obamacare, right? You had to pass the bill before you know what's in it. So that's number one. And number two, we have 300 million people in this country we care about, right? So we don't want to worry about the insurance companies, the big insurers, and talk about an insurance problem. You hit it right in our bill, Sanford in the House, and then Rand Paul on the Senate side. What we have to do is bend the cost curve down. We haven't done that, right? Everybody's premiums out there are going up 20% still. So the first thing you got to do is inject free market economics into this. And we were talking about that. Grants, HSA.
But Paul Ryan reiterated that too, with healthcare savings accounts, portability. We can now, believe it or not, it's illegal right now if you want to have a catastrophic plan, which is insane for a young person.
They're mentioning those as talking points and shopping across state lines, but it's not the driving force, right? And so if you're worried, when those insurance guys walked in the White House, they were looking at their shoe leather because they were embarrassed about the product that was coming our way. I think they knew it. It was a trade of 18 million more customers, and they would get covered, and they'd make some money. But they knew that it was going to be a death spiral system in the long run that could lead to, just national health care.
Health care is a big issue. I guess we got to see the bill scored. You guys have your bill along with Rand Paul. Here's the big picture for me. If the president is able to change the tax code from 7 brackets to 3, give us a 15% corporate tax, allow repatriation for multinational corporations, trillions that are parked overseas, they invest in factories, manufacturing centers here in America. If we become energy independent, it'll be like a tax cut if we do get rid of Obamacare. The economy I see growing and flourishing. Can all of that get done?
Economic renaissance.
You really?
I really believe it.
So millions of Americans out of work, in poverty, on food stamps, get out of poverty, back to work.
Well, and it's jobs. It's not just small, low-paying jobs. It's great jobs. And when you start to see a 4% or a 4.5% GDP growth, all this, I mean, it would be unbelievable. But the president knocked the ball out of the park tonight. I mean, he's delivering on his promises. We've been waiting for this city to do that, and the president's doing it.
Okay, so it really is going to come down, though, to Congress. Are you guys confident?
Our task is real simple. We make it way too complicated around here. do what we told the voters we were going to do. President Trump gave that kind of speech tonight. He says now it's time to deliver on the things he promised the American people. We promised the American people that we would secure the border, build the wall.
I could be like a peace negotiator, because I feel like I'm talking to groups that say the same thing, but you guys aren't communicating.
Well, there's one plan out there, Sean. There's one plan out there right now in health care that does exactly what we told the voters we were going to do. Repeal it. Is Paul Ryan scoring that bill? No, not we haven't had ours scored, but we know it'll score better than theirs. We know that.
Are you guys communicating?
We are, and we're meeting with him tomorrow morning. Actually,
okay.
Talk about all kinds of things.
Right.
So, and health care will be first on the.
Because he said he wants to reach out to you, all of you.
We got a meeting tomorrow morning.
And what about his promise that he thinks he can get it done in 200 days?
We better.
We've got to get it done with
Got to get it done.
And by the way, there are people that keep saying, Sean and Mr. President, you got to understand, we're limited in what we can do in trying to repeal it, because we're doing it through this mechanism that doesn't allow us to completely repeal. But Sean, this is exactly what we did in 2015, back when we did it in 2015.
So that's a good point. So you have Congressman Meadows?
Yeah, I think the real key is in the first 200 days, it can't just be about Obamacare repeal and replacement. It's got to be tax reform. It's got to be strengthening our military. It's got to be
everything
the
the president said
everything
tonight.
you talked about in the first 200 days. If it doesn't get done then, it's not going to get done.
Okay,
and so we're committed to do
says
that.
He supports it. You guys say they support it. Maybe it's just me, but I've had a sense of urgency my whole life. What is this? You guys got a week off last week. What is that?
For the last 6 years, we said we're going to repeal Obamacare.
Right.
American people like you are going to wake up with a heart attack if we replace Obamacare with Obamacare Light. Then they're going to say...
You worried about that?
Yes, I'm worried about that. And then they're going to say...
They have the heart attack, they won't have good health care to take care of them.
And they're going to say that's not a repeal. You did not repeal a nationally, federally run health care system that's clogging the arteries.
Is it unrealistic for conservatives like me to wish that you guys could move at the speed of Trump? Is that unrealistic?
No, we should be moving it. And what you said is bipartisan. JFK, right? He did the tax cuts, and we got 5% real growth. Then Reagan comes in, does the tax cuts, you get 5% real growth. So it's not. We're not making this up. We can.
And you brought it up with Newt last night. They got the contract with America done in 100 days.
Right. Yeah. But he actually said tonight that this was a bigger, bolder agenda. By the way, I believe that.
I agree.
If this happens.
Yeah.
I think the country's in a precipitous decline. I think if we don't do these things, and that's why I wanted Donald Trump to be president, that's why I'm so happy tonight. He reiterated his promises. He's keeping his word. I just want Congress to do it. You guys are committed to doing it.
Sean, the part I like most about the speech is at the start when he said, America's ready to lead.
That's right.
That set an entirely different context. They sure did. But think about the framework that we've been used to with President Obama, leading from behind, the Iran deal, his lack of relationship with our best ally, Israel. That set the tone.
I got to say goodbye. Louis is a new member of the Freedom Caucus. You guys go out drinking and celebrating. All right, have a good time.
All right, thanks, Sean.
All right, up next tonight, right here on Hannity.
My budget will also increase funding for our veterans. Our veterans have delivered for this nation, and now we must deliver for them.
President Donald Trump promising to protect America's vets. That and more as we continue from our nation's capital.